Session is called to order. Can we have the roll, please?
Danielle Bailey.
Here.
Greg Strike.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Seth Anderson.
Here.
Brian Looney.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Aaron O'Quinn.
Here.
Radhika Krishna.
Here.
Jim Winchester.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, next item of business, minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Commissioner Looney, seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Any objection? Seeing no objection, the minutes are approved. Moving on, the next thing on our agenda is the public hearings. I'll go ahead and read. Oh, sorry, disclosures. Commissioner Winchester,
No disclosures.
Commissioner O'Quinn,
None.
Commissioner Gardner,
No disclosures.
Commissioner Strike,
No disclosure.
Commissioner Looney,
No disclosures.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Yeah, in the matter of case 2019-0160, the petitioner Vertical Bridge, Spinell Homes had previously entered into agreement to purchase a separate piece of land from Vertical Bridge. And that deal is, we terminated that agreement, but we are still generally in discussions with the Vertical Bridge and the municipality about that piece of land. So I want to disclose that.
Are you going to be abstaining from?
I could.
Since there is still a matter at hand, I would say that based on the disclosure criteria, that you would have potentially conjectural or inconclusive interest that could be have a monetary interest in it in the future projected. So I think it would be wise to abstain.
Then I'll be abstaining from that.
Okay. Commissioner Krishna.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Anderson.
None.
And I also have no disclosures at this time. So now moving on to public hearings. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meeting is as follows. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearings, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all of their representatives, will receive 10 minutes. Part of their time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representative of groups, such as community councils, PTAs, and other organizations will receive 5 minutes. Individuals will receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Yeah, Commissioner Spinelli, you're now excused for this first portion of the meeting. We'll send someone out to get you when we've moved on to the next public hearing item. All right, staff, can we hear the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a request for a conditional use permit for a Type 3 telecommunication tower in the R2M district. The petition site has 2 existing towers originally constructed in 1968. The south tower has structurally deteriorated over the past 51 years and needs to be replaced. Approval of this application will allow the south telecommunication tower to be wrapped with a slightly larger tower around the existing structure. The tower will remain the same height of 283 feet. The R2M district allows a Type 3 tower that does not exceed 65 feet, provided it meets the 200% of the maximum allowed tower height from protected land uses. The applicant has applied for a variance to the separation distance from protected land uses and of height under case 2020-0004, which is going to be considered by the Assembly. The towers were constructed in 1968 before zoning and tower height restrictions were established. A nonconforming determination letter was established in 2009 that gave the existing tower nonconforming rights for use and height. However, planning staff is requesting a condition that the applicant update the determination to establish any nonconforming rights the tower may have related to current Title 21 items. 1,278 public hearing notices were mailed. No responses were received from the public, and the Abbott Loop Community Council did not provide comment. In the matter of findings for AMC 2103-080D, which is the conditional uses approval criteria, staff finds that Standard 1 is met. The proposed use is consistent with the comp plan, the Anchorage 2020 comp plan goals of communications in Chapter 2 states that the proliferation of transmission and receiving facilities is likely, and the issues are those of increased capacity and speed for voice, video, and data transmissions. There are no 2020 specific policies to telecommunication facilities other than general aesthetics. However, they do not relate to the location design of utility infrastructure. Instead, the conditional use requirements are more directly related to that issue. The existing telecommunication tower provides a range of broadcasting services, including cellular, television, and radio. The tower site is existing and will not be modified in any way that may affect the natural environment. In the standards, in the finding for condition number 2, that standard has been met. The proposed use is consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning district. The proposed Type 3 telecommunication tower is allowed by a conditional use permit in the R2M district, which, and that's what we're here for today. Standard 3 has been met or may be met by conditions of this approval. It's consistent with any specific allowable use standards in Chapter 2105. So that gets into the telecommunication tower's use-specific standards. Minimum separation distance from protected land uses. The standard is not met. The tower height is 283 feet, and the nearest protected land use is residential structure, about 180 feet to the south. This does not meet the minimum separation distance, and the petitioner is applying for a variance to the assembly per AMC 2105-040K74, and staff has made approval of the variance from protected land uses a conditional approval for the conditional for this conditional use. For the tower structure height, the tower is located in a residential district with a height limit of 65 feet. The proposed tower is going to be 283 feet. That's existing. And in AMC 2105-040K3G, a tower or antenna does that not meet the standards set forth in this section may be approved through the conditional use process. This commission has the authority to approve additional height through the conditional use. The height of the tower wrap, it should be noted, will be the same height as the original tower, and the upgrade is providing a structural tower that can support its current loading and additional requested loading for future demand. Since the tower predates zoning, the tower is a legal non-conforming structure. In matters of D, co-location, the standard is met. The tower will be constructed to allow co-location, and the existing tower already allows for co-location. Parking, the standard is met. Aerial photos and the non-conforming determination show that off-street parking is provided. Landscaping and fencing, which is I, the standard is not met but can be met. This is in relation to all towers and related ground-mounted equipment shall be surrounded by a site-obscuring fence at least 6 feet tall. In dedicated parks, residential districts, which this is, within 150 feet of the residential district, chain link, plastic, or vinyl fencing screening is prohibited. The tower is surrounded currently by a 7-foot tall chain link fence. So a requested condition of approval is to replace that chain link with a site-obscuring fence that meets the standards of GI, or apply for non-conforming rights for the existing fence. In dedicated parks, residential districts, or 150 feet within the residential district, barbed wire is prohibited. So the chain link security fence has barbed wire, and we're requesting a condition of approval to remove the security barbed wire and come into compliance or apply for any non-conforming rights for the fence and barbed wire. 3, this speaks to within 150 feet of residential districts, L1 visual enhancement landscaping shall be provided around the outside of the fence. So the standard is not met, but no landscape plan was included with the application. So the existing natural vegetation that's around the site, around the towers, may meet the requirements of L1 landscaping. So staff has made a condition of approval to provide a landscaping plan to the planning department showing either existing or proposed L1 landscaping or established non-conforming rights for the lack of L1 visual enhancement landscaping. For H, in security, the standard is met. The tower structures, support structures shall be secured to prevent unauthorized access. It is gated and fenced. Separation distance, towers shall maintain a minimum spacing of 1/2 mile unless the applicant reasonably demonstrates limitations in the immediate service area prohibit the provisions and is technically impractical or does not sufficiently meet the coverage needs. There's an included coverage map in the application packet, and staff finds the standards met. There's a tower located 250 feet north of this existing tower, and it does not support co-location or relocation. The existing tower has several carriers which provide different services ranging from cellular, internet, television, and radio, and the applicant is co-located on both those towers. J, installation. All transmitting antennas shall be installed in a manner set forth by the FCC. The standard is met. The antennas are installed in accordance with FCC, ANSI, and NIER regulations. For the tower lighting, staff finds the standard is not met. The Federal Aviation Administration requires lighting for this tower, and the lighting plan was not indicated on the plans. So a required condition of approval is to provide a tower lighting detail for approval by the planning department in accordance with the FAA lighting requirements. In the matters of L, equipment lighting, staff finds that standard is not met, but it can be met. The existing lights are on motion sensors. There was no detail provided in a plan that shows shielding of the lighting or how the light is directed towards the ground. Once again, staff has recommended a condition of approval to provide a lighting detail plan. In the matters of the M, tower color, for the Type 3 tower, the standard is met. The tower is steel with partial markings of alternative sections of aviation orange and white in accordance with the FAA. For N, the identification placard, the standard has not been met, but it can be met. That's in reference to the name and address of the tower structure owner, tower structure manager, the date of the erection of the tower, and the owner's name and address of each antenna on the tower structure. Staff is requesting that they provide a detail of the required placard and all the required information. Time for construction, that standard has been met. The applicant has stated that the tower is existing and the planned construction tower wrap is to take place over a 2 or 3 month period depending on weather. In the matters of 2105-040K8, that's the specific standards for type of communication towers. It should read Type 3 tower setbacks. So this deals with setbacks of the tower, and it also deals with the guy wires. So with the tower, the minimum distance from any lot line to the tower structure shall be equal to or greater than the distance measured from the tower to the outermost guy wire anchor. So the standard may be met by approval of conditional use. So the distance from the lot line to the tower is 115.5 feet, and the distance from the tower structure to the outermost guy wire is 180. That does not meet the minimum distance required from the lot line. However, AMC 2105-040K3G states that a tower that does not meet the standards may be approved through the conditional use process. So this commission has the authority to approve the revised setback distance through the conditional use. And for the guy wires, so the guy wires that they are stated in the application will be 0.50 inch diameter wire, and it's set back 25 feet. So the code reads that if a guy wire is 0.50, then it should be 25 feet, provided the setback may be reduced to 5 feet if the anchor structure is enclosed with a site obscuring fence. So the site plan shows a site obscuring fence, but no detail or dimension. So a requested condition is to provide a detail showing the distance from the property line and showing the side obscuring fence being placed there. The existing guy wires are being removed and are replaced with new guy wires. 4, the site size, dimensions, shape, location are adequate topography as well for the needs of the proposed use. Staff finds the standards met. The existing tower structure has received no complaints and is adequate for the existing tower. In the matters of 5, that proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding area. Staff finds that standards met. The telecommunication tower has been in existence since 1968 and has become part of the character of the area. 6, the proposed use is compatible with uses allowed on adjacent properties. Staff finds that standards met. There are residential uses to the south, east, and west of the site. However, natural buffer vegetation separates the adjacent properties from the tower site to the east and partially to the west and south. 7, any significant impacts anticipated result will be mitigated. The standard has been found to be met. The telecommunication tower is existing and is unmanned. Number 8, the staff finds that standard has been met. The proposed use is appropriately located with respect to the transportation system and/or planned streets, designations and improvements, and the street capacity. So the site has access to East Dalian Road, and East Dalian Road is an existing paved street classified as a Class 3 major arterial in the 2014 Official Streets and Highways Plan, and traffic should not be adversely affected. In number 9, the standard has been met. The proposed use is appropriately located. The site is located within building service, fire, police, and EMS service areas and is served by on-site water and wastewater systems. Staff, as mentioned before, we did place some conditions on here found on page 10 and 11 of the staff packet. We're recommending approval of the conditional use permit for a Type 3 telecommunication tower in the R2M district. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I believe Commissioner Strike had a question here earlier about. I'll let him let him state the question first, and then we can answer it.
Thank you. Commissioner Strike?
Yeah, leading up into that. So we've got a tower that was built, 2 towers that were built in 1968 for an intended use and purpose. And one of the towers, the one in question here, has now been deemed structurally deteriorated and needs to be replaced. But we're not replacing the tower. Instead, it sounds like we're going to rebuild the tower and using a wrap around the tower base, not extending the height. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So is it for that reason there why we are here, because this tower has deteriorated, and it's solely that reason why we're here looking for a conditional use?
That is correct.
So part of this conditional use is to rebuild this tower, not replace it, and build it in a manner that will allow for conducive co-location of use with other parties.
It's existing, has co-location, but this will be able to support any further co-location if the separation distances are met.
Now there are 2 towers, basically 2 towers co-located in the same location, adjacent to each other.
Correct.
Who's the owner of both of these? Is the same owner own both of these towers?
Vertical Bridge owns both, yes.
They do own both.
Yeah.
So is it the intention to decommission one of the towers by use of co-location and take the need away for one of the towers?
No, I don't believe so. That's something we could ask the applicant, but they're just replacing this structurally deficient tower.
Were both towers built at or around the same time?
Yes, it looks like they were both constructed in 1968, and I don't know the status of the other tower, if it's going to need to be replaced or not.
Well, one of the requirements for the communication piece, and one of the requirements here, is to have towers that can utilize co-location. And we have a owner who owns 2 towers adjacent to each other, rebuilding one of them for the purpose of building it so it can be used for co-location. And there's a statement on separation distance. The applicant is co-locating on both existing towers.
Yeah, we'd have to ask the applicant, but I believe currently both towers are co-located and they may be maxed out.
Well, hopefully they're taking notes. So
And this is basically just a repair and replace of the existing tower,
Okay.
so they can continue.
Well, not just repair and replace, because the old tower didn't allow or wasn't sufficient to allow co-location. But part of this conditional use is to rebuild this tower such that it can be used specifically for co-location.
I believe the current tower that's in question here currently has co-location on it, but they want to expand that as well.
Yeah, on page 5, it says the existing tower already allows for co-location.
Will allow.
I think there already is co-location of
Yeah.
telecommunication facilities on there, and I think with the newer tower, they'll be able to add additional co-location. That's maybe what should have been stated.
Okay.
Further.
I'm just seeing if there's a means or ways to minimize impact. Co-location is a desired result that we like to see, and to see two such large towers. But the only reason we're here for this one is this one was deteriorated to that extent.
Yeah, but I believe the petitioner's goal is to definitely maximize their co-location capabilities.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I think my first question relates to the criteria that we need to be looking at here for this case. And there are a couple of points in the packet that reference a section of the code, which is 2105, what is this? 040K3G, which is the provision that authorizes the CUP for these towers. And there's language in that section that says, to approve such an application, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall find that, in addition to the standard approval criteria for CUP, and it also references case 6, and then it says we need to find that denial would unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services or prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless service. And case 6 has a couple of other criteria, and I don't see those criteria discussed in the packet. And my reading of that provision makes it sound like that's a finding that we would need to make to approve the CUP, and I'm wondering if staff concurs with my reading of that section.
Well,
guess
K6 does talk about conditional use approval, so that would be the page 2 and 3 of the staff packet, which is at 2103-080D, conditional uses approval criteria. So the K6 reads, in addition to the general standards, and for conditional use approval, the decision-making body shall also consider the following factors in approving the decision.
Yeah, and specifically,
that's the A through H that I had read about height of the tower, proximity.
okay.
So that we did cover those approval criteria there, and then we approved the conditional use approval criteria, as well as the telecommunication tower specific standards.
Sorry, the A through H, where in the staff packet is the A through H you referenced?
So we go with height of the proposed tower structure. Let's see here.
I think a lot of those are referenced, but in case 6, specifically H, availability of suitable existing towers, and then no new tower structure shall be permitted unless the applicant demonstrates that no existing tower structure can accommodate or replace, and then no alternative technology that doesn't require the tower structures can accommodate or replace. And those findings, I guess I'm reading that we need to make some finding about those factors, and I don't see that addressed, and I'm wondering.
Let's see, I'll have to find that. We did address it, and I'm trying to find the propagation map that they listed in their application packet here. It may be a little better question for the applicant. Let me take a quick look. Let's see here.
And I apologize for not raising this
Oh, no,
earlier.
that's
I was
fine.
late in preparing this week.
They have focus zone coverage. Yeah, I'll have to dig through here a little bit and try to find their,
Okay, I'd appreciate it if you could let me know
Okay.
if you find that. And then relatedly then, in that K3G, do we need to be making a finding that denying the application, in order to approve it, do we need to make a finding that denying it would have this unreasonable discriminatory effect?
yeah, so yes, you would. And your question mainly is there other towers around that they could co-locate on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would certainly be relevant to those factors, but more broadly, I mean, to me, going through this, I don't know that I have seen kind of discussion or information about discrimination among providers of functional equivalent services. I'm not exactly sure what that even means. And if that's a finding that we need to make to approve this, I'm
Well, I believe the applicant is co-locating with different providers currently, so they're not discriminated in that. That's where I believe that was set up to where you can't just let one company on your tower.
okay.
You have to allow co-location with other companies,
Okay.
and they are doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then I had another question. With respect to the variance application, I wasn't 100% sure what the sections were that the variance was being requested for. Is it just the separation distance from protected land, or was it also height?
It's the separation distance is what is going to the assembly.
Okay.
And the height is through the conditional use process here today.
Okay.
So effectively approving the conditional use with these conditions also is granting that height of 283 feet.
Okay. And on that variance then for the separation distance, I didn't see in the proposed conditions of approval a specific reference to that. Was that something that was intended to be there that we want to make sure is there, or is that?
Yeah, definitely. It's the cases that's going to the assembly is 2020-0004. And if we go to page 4 of the staff packet at the top, we read that the tower height is 283 feet, and then the third sentence in, it says, separation distance, the petitioner is applying for a variance to the assembly, and there's your code citation, AMC 2105040K74.
And then the reference to making approval of the variance a condition for approval, on the conditions of approval on page 10 and 11, is that there somewhere that I'm not seeing? Or should that be added if this is approved with that condition?
That should be added.
Okay. And then on that same point, sorry, the final question I have is why is it that, and maybe this is obvious, but that the variance is required for that aspect, but that through the CIP we're able to kind of overcome the height disparity, for example, and I think there's another provision that was not met.
That's the way that the code was approved by the assembly and the way it was written up. They
Okay.
felt that if there was the separation distance, the fall down radius that they've discussed previously, that it would be the assembly that would take a look at that and would grant that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner O'Quinn?
So I was just looking at the, you're asking us to grant this based on, this decreased fall down distance, or, the fact that if this thing falls over, it's going to hit some houses probably. And I'm looking at the design criteria, and it's saying, wind speed of 60 miles an hour in combination with ice. I mean, we exceeded those kind of conditions just recently, in the Anchorage Bowl. I kind of wonder if, who reviews this engineering data to make sure that it's,
Well, if you're referring through Madam Chair, Quinn, once again, the separation distance is going to be through the assembly process. Now, there's no planning staff doesn't have any engineers on the planning staff that can look at that dimension, or the wind speed and the low ice loading, things like that. So it's up to the engineer to provide that, and that's why the engineer's stamping that. But that's all going to be the separation. That's all going to be a variance through the assembly process, not through the Plan and Zoning Commission.
Through the chair, Mr. O'Quinn, I might just elaborate slightly on Mr. Odell's answer. The approval of the tower, construction of the tower, will have to go through building safety for permitting, and they'll evaluate the engineer's plans to ensure that it is safe and that all the applicable standards are met from a building safety perspective.
Commissioner Looney?
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the concept where we are considering the height or the liable height is a major factor, where we're really supposed to ignore the separation distance. Is that what I understand?
That is correct, Mr. Coney.
And like as we go through the different approval criteria, I know it's like, for one example would be the one for the lot. I guess number 4, where it talks about the lot size, dimensions, and shape, and things like that. Are they adequate for this use? And my first thought was, well, that one's not going to work because it's just not big enough for this big a tower. But somehow we say it does meet the use. Is that because we're ignoring the separation distance? And if you ignore the separation distance, this huge tower can fit on this relatively small lot.
Through the Madam Chair, Mr. Looney, yes, but it's a legally non-conforming structure. The structure has grandfather rights. So it's just like anything else that has non-conforming rights in town. This has non-conforming rights for the height. As you noticed in the beginning, that the tower, height and use.
As long as it doesn't fall down and hit a house.
Well, that's going to be up to the assembly to decide.
Yeah. Well, I guess I read the sentence which says no negative impacts on adjacent properties, as long as the engineer knows what he's doing. Okay.
Commissioner Strike?
Yeah, back to your kind of glib remark, as long as it doesn't fall and hit a house. But we're here because we have a older tower that's deteriorated to the point that it's got to be replaced and fixed, and nowhere in any of the data that I see on the from the planning department on the letter, it shows all the work that's been done on the site. Does it show that there's been any significant repairs and maintenance and so forth on the tower? So we got to a point where now we got to replace it before, because if it falls over, it is going to hit something. So now I'm a little concerned about the operators of the building, of the tower, properly maintaining the tower to the point that it's at a point where it has structurally deteriorated over the past years and needs to be replaced.
Well,
So I'm concerned how we got to this point,
that would be a question for the petitioner.
especially when we're asking for a conditional use waiver.
Yeah, I believe that would be a good question for the petitioner.
I'm hoping they're taking notes again.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no more questions from the commission, could we hear from the petitioner? Please let us know if you want to reserve any time for rebuttal.
Sure. My name is Gary Brecky. I filed the application for the CUP, and I am a contractor representing Vertical Bridge on this. So there's been some good discussion about the integrity of the tower. I'd like to say that it isn't solely because of the deterioration that the tower wrap has been proposed, although that is a factor. The company, Vertical Bridge, has had requests to modify equipment that's being placed on the tower, wants to be placed on the tower. And the wrap will accommodate the additional equipment that the wireless carriers want to put on there, plus provide additional loading for additional carriers, which would negate any new towers necessarily in the immediate area. So I just wanted to say that right off. So Any other questions or?
Did you have any other presentation or?
Well, not really. I mean, you've got the packets in front of you. I would say that there is lighting on this tower that meets FAA specifications. I had not provided a lighting detail in the packet, but it's already lit according to what the FAA requires, and the new tower would be lit accordingly as well. So. Gary Brecky. And also, to let you know, Vertical Bridge acquired this property about 4 years ago. So they're a relatively new owner of the tower, and so they've inherited this property, and the business that Vertical Bridge is in is providing wireless infrastructure, and they do this throughout the country. And so one of the reasons that they want to upgrade is so that they can provide additional space for additional carriers on this tower. So it has deteriorated. Obviously, 51 years is quite a while for a tower to be up. And they just aren't completely sure what the condition of the tower is because they haven't been able to do an internal review or inspection of the tower members themselves, although there is some indication that deterioration is taking place.
One of the elements I'm looking at is that when this tower was first granted back in the 60s, it was for radio.
Yes.
And there was a television studio adjacent to the property, but it doesn't indicate that it was used as a television tower, but it was strictly used as a radio tower for distribution. And so throughout time, communications have changed, but the intended use back in the 60s, again, was for radio. Now, as we get into the telecommunications and we see the different technology take place, what we're seeing is smaller towers, not larger towers. We're seeing the cell phone towers don't need to be as big. We're seeing that technology has said we can, there's other ways to get away from these large 250-foot mammoth towers that are proliferating, that used to proliferate the cities. You go down in the lower 48, you don't see these towers anymore, unless they're up on a hillside or they're located differently. So as I look at it, we've got two towers here, and maybe I missed it in your introduction. Is there any chances that these two towers could be co-located together and we have one tower?
Well, I think I can't really say what the north tower is used for. I haven't focused any of my attention on that, but from what I understand, that is an occupied tower by either radio or TV antennas. The south tower that we're concerned with about here tonight is also still used, I believe, as a radio tower, but there's also wireless broadband, there's cellular, microwave, there's other carriers on that tower as well. So it's being maximized in its usage. Now, I can't speak to the north tower, and I just know that it's being used for some kind of broadcast.
But we don't know if it's being maximized. We know it's being used, but we don't know if it's has met its maximum usage.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it's capable of having other wireless carriers on it. It may be the nature of the broadcast tower that it can't or can't easily be done. There are some towers that are called hot towers. Okay, so the tower itself is a radiating element. That may be the case on that north tower. I don't know.
Well, my concern is, and I think the other commissioner has identified too, that the telecommunication industry has changed, and there's certain rules that apply to cellular communications and communication that are different than radio.
Right.
Yet we have a tower that was grandfathered for radio, not for cellular, not for the new advent of telecommunications that we're using today. So now we're bridging and we're melding these two technologies now together here in 2020 and trying to find making sure that we're using the right technology and so forth, but are we really going out there and saying we're going to grandfather 1960s technology and we're going to grandfather it for all the new technology moving forward and they get to piggyback on a 283-foot tower that would not be allowed anywhere near what we're doing in town today.
Right. Well, there is a technology that is mounted at the top of this tower. It's a wireless broadband company, and they need the height to provide the services that they're providing.
But
Now, the cellular, these are kind of different technologies, right? The cellular maybe doesn't need to be that high, and they are in fact down lower on the tower.
But the only reason they get that height is because they're piggybacking on somebody that's grandfathered into a 1960s tower.
Sure,
That
but,
that the conditional use in 1960 didn't grant that type of use.
well, right, but they're utilizing a resource that's in place already,
Understand?
without having to build another new tower somewhere to obtain the same type of coverage. In fact, it may, for them, it may require 5 more towers. If you kick them off of that height, it may require 5 additional towers for them to co-locate on
no,
to get the same coverage.
Current technology, and I'm keeping up on it.
Yeah.
You know, right now they're on top of street lights. They're on top of major intersections, and you don't even know that they're there, except in this town. This town, we seem to know where all the towers are because they're bright, sore spots, and you see them front and center. Now, when you see these 283-foot towers, of which there's about 4 of them around town, I'm just trying to determine, is this a time to fix an age-old problem, or do we just let bygones be bygones and let it roll? Let's just keep going. It's been being done since 1960, whatever, let's keep going.
Well, I mean, I
Or do
agree
we
with
fix
you.
it now?
You know, I've been in the wireless business for almost 25 years now, and as networks mature, generally you don't want tall towers in a network. But
We've gone from analog to digital, and digital
Right.
requires more towers.
and what you're talking about, the street light, is the new 5G technology that all the carriers are rolling out. It's a very high frequency band and has a very short signal radius. But there are still cell sites that require some height to them. And in fact, Vertical Bridge, I think, has had interest in a couple additional carriers that are not currently on that site that would like to locate on that site at various heights. I don't know what heights they've proposed, but the new tower would provide that vertical real estate for them to locate their technologies on, and it wouldn't require any other towers in the area.
Back again, the new height?
The height of this tower wrap is still proposed to be the same height as the existing tower. So, but the new tower, the wrapped tower, would provide the loading that would accommodate them to locate their antennas at other various heights. So it would negate the need for additional towers in the area.
You mentioned that the petitioner inherited this site?
Well, they bought the property,
Okay.
you know,
So
they
it's a
purchased
business-
it.
It was a business, financial.
Sure.
They came in with their eyes open. It just wasn't.
I don't know about that, but they
Well,
acquired the site.
But when you told us they inherited it, it sounded like they didn't have a choice. They inherited it.
Well,
Like they inherited
I
a
didn't mean it
problem.
that way. What I meant was they bought the site and inherited the situation that came with it in
They
the
made a
purchase.
business decision, and
Right. And so now they want to improve the situation so it'll accommodate additional technologies and carriers.
thank you.
So,
Commissioner Looney.
Actually, my question is more on your background as far as your, with the Vertical Bridge. Have you been involved with any new towers construction in the Anchorage area or in other cities like Anchorage?
I was project manager for the different iterations of AT&T Mobility through the years from 95 till about 3 years ago when I retired early from AT&T Mobility. And we built new towers all over the state, and lots of them right here in Anchorage. I've never had to do a CUP on them, though, in Anchorage here, so.
Perfect. That's really where my question is. So on from the list of the allowable heights, and that's really where we're focused on today. I can't even think about the actual separation distance, but on heights, it just seems like this 283-foot height is way out of proportion of what's typically allowed. Have you ever designed a tower within urban area that's anywhere near this height?
I'm not a design engineer. I was a
Have you
project
worked on a
manager.
project with?
But no, and the only reason that we're pursuing this is because the tower exists as it is. And you have to realize that when it was built, there was nothing around it.
It was the edge of town. That's right.
Right, it was in the middle of nowhere. I don't think the people who built it ever thought that there would be a neighborhood springing up on three sides of it.
That's my
And
point.
it is an 8.5 acre parcel. It's a fairly large parcel. And one of the things that I think I've discussed with some of the Muni guys is why, when zoning came in, why was this not zoned as an antenna farm? Because it had 2 towers on it. It never should have been lumped in as an R2M, but it is. And so I think we wouldn't even probably be having this discussion if it was an antenna farm. So,
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you. I'm just curious if you know the height of the other tower on the property.
I'm thinking it's 580, but I wouldn't quote myself on it.
Okay. And then one other quick question. In the materials prepared by the staff with respect to, there is one of the criteria relates to setbacks, and there's discussion about the guy wire distances relative to the height, and the references to the guy wires are being removed and replaced with new guy wires attached. And I'm wondering if in that process, is that going to change the geometry in any way, or is it going to remain the same?
Yeah, well, currently there are 9 guy anchor points for this tower. The new tower wrap reduces it to 3. So all the guy anchors get consolidated on each of the 3 points down to 1 guy anchor point. So yes, it does change the look about it, and I think it would enhance the setback.
And do you know if the maximum distance from the tower to the outermost guy anchor point, if that will change from how it is currently?
I'm not sure. I don't have that right in front of me, but.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Krishna?
Thank you. I have a question for the petitioner and then maybe one for the staff. The equipment that's on the tower right now, does it require the full 283-foot height to achieve whatever service or coverage it's doing?
One of the clients on the tower is a wireless broadband that is at the top of the tower, 283 feet up. There are antennas scattered along its vertical height that include microwave, which connects different points from other microwave sites in the city. But there's also radio antennas up there, cellular antennas, and so there's a variety of communications antennas scattered up and down the tower.
Okay. Would those other uses be still possible on, say, a 150-foot tower or a 100-foot tower?
I would say, well, I mean, they could be, but the coverage areas are defined already as the antennas exist at their current heights. So once a coverage area has been established, it's really not a good idea to go backwards, because then it's a complete redesign of the engineering of the network to do that, and may require additional towers, new towers being built to fill in the gaps that might be left by that.
Right. And then just so I'm understanding, the wrap technology or process is the only way to do a wrap is just over and achieving the same height as the existing structure. Have there been sort of cases where they've wrapped part of the tower or something like that?
I'm not aware of that, and the wrap concept is actually new to me. The company did do a wrap on the KTVA tower that's in Midtown at 32nd Avenue at Cope Street. So that one has been done. This one is going to be identical to that, and it not only requires a new foundation or an enhanced foundation of the existing foundation, but it, as it scales up the tower, the old tower gets attached to the new wrap, and just becomes part of the new structure. So the new structure is just more structurally robust.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Commissioner O'Quinn?
So through the chair, so even if this had been zoned an antenna farm, you'd only have a 200-foot height. You'd have a 200-foot height limitation, and so you're asking for essentially 80 feet more than that. As it stands as a residential, you're asking for, 4 to 5 times the allowed height. I think I kind of echo Commissioner Krishna's questions regarding reduction to the scope of what you're asking for here. Is there any possibility that you could be closer to the permitted antenna farm height of 200 feet?
I would say at this point, we'd like to try to do the full 283, the full wrap. I mean, the thing that we're, or that I am relying on is that this is grandfathered in, it's been there, it's part of the landscape, and it's never been an issue. We haven't had one public comment, as far as I know, on this. We sent out 1,700 mailers and not one response. I didn't get a call. And when I went to the community council meeting to present the project, I was asked one question because I produced a document for the folks that were there, and the one question was, is this picture in your document a picture of the tower at Lake Otis and Dowling? I said yes. That was the only question I got. So I don't see the height being an issue because it hasn't been for 51 years. At least not one that has struck the public somehow.
So, just a follow-up question. It seems that the code requires the removal of the barbed wire, yet securing of the area. Do you all plan to seek a variance to have the barbed wire remain in?
I'd wait and see if the conditional use permit's approved and what conditions there are, and then propose those conditions to Vertical Bridge. I didn't see anything in the recommendations for conditions that was egregious or that was concerning, really. They may opt to try to apply for nonconformance for some of them, but others in there, I don't see them being a problem at all.
Thanks.
Commissioner Strike?
I would counter, in 52 years, you haven't had a conditional use request that's come before the board and put out there, which is why you haven't had probably some of the comments that you were injecting to earlier. But would you characterize the description of the tower? The south tower has structurally deteriorated over the past 51 years and needs to be replaced. That's what's been presented to us.
Well,
would you characterize that?
That's a point.
That's a true statement.
That's a point. Yes, it should be replaced. Yep.
There is a structural analysis report that was done in February of 2019. Are you aware of that report?
Yes.
Are you aware of the footnotes for the assumptions?
Not intimately or per each one, no.
Footnote number 1, and I can be corrected here on this. Number 1, the existing tower has been maintained to manufacturer's specifications and is in good condition. So somehow, since in 11 months, we've gone to a tower in good condition to one that now needs to be replaced, has to have a structural wrap put on it, and I believe through the staff, the purpose of which is here is so that it can be co-located with other types of equipment to expand its use.
Well, and that's why I brought that point up, was not only was
consistencies in our write-ups here.
Okay.
I don't like to be told one thing, find another thing, and dig through. And I want to know why we're really here. And it's a financial decision, is what you're trying to expand the use of your tower.
Sure.
Period. Not because it's deteriorated, not because it's dilapidated, not because it's ready to fall down. This is a pure economic reason that you're here.
Well, I guess I wouldn't rely solely on that.
Well,
it's also the deterioration is a concern, okay?
Well, then I'd be talking to the engineer who did the structural analysis.
And there's been some question about that internally, but be that as it may, I think that it's a concern, 51-year-old tower, it's a concern. But it's also to provide additional loading for some of the new technologies.
Well,
And
this said that the loading that at the current tower is sufficient enough to take on. There's 8 assumption footnotes. I would probably advise you to read those. And my reason for pushing back on this is that we have folks behind you that are going to be coming forth, and I have no idea what they're going to say.
Okay.
But a lot of what we're trying to ferret out is so that the citizens have visibility and transparency as to what's taking place here, why it's taking place, who it's being taken place by. And too many times that gets hidden. It gets lost in the shuffle. And I'm just here to pull back the sheets and let's have full transparency to alleviate their concerns, if they have any, which we may or may not hear about. But then
Sure.
again, you sent out 1,780, whatever number of, and didn't get a single response back.
Right.
Thank you.
Just one final question. You mentioned it yourself, but I just wanted to check to make sure that all the conditions of approval that the staff recommended, the petitioner is okay with those?
Well, I don't know that for sure, but there may be some of them that they would apply for a nonconformance on, but I didn't see anything there that was egregious that they would have any heartburn over.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this matter at this time? All right. I believe the petitioner still has 7 minutes and 52 seconds for rebuttal. If you would like to speak at all, the floor is yours again.
I'll just offer myself up for any additional questions, if you have any.
I see no further questions.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
All right, staff, what is the will of the body? There's a motion by Commissioner Anderson? Or is that an old? Okay. Would you like to take the opportunity to make a motion?
I can make the motion, but I'm not prepared to speak to it right now.
All right.
So for the matter of case 2019-0160, I move to approve the conditional use for a 283-foot Type 3 telecommunications tower, subject to the conditions provided on page 10 and 11 of the staff packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Gardner. Mr. Odell.
I'd like to add, I believe Commissioner Gardner brought it up, we're going to add number 5 to that, which is obtain approval of case 2020-0004 for variance of separation distance per AMC 2105040 K74.
All right. Not to be presumptuous, but Commissioner Gardner, did you want to add that as an amendment?
Yes.
Laura, do you need that restated or? Oh, Commissioner Anderson, did you want to add that?
That would be great.
All right. And Commissioner Gardner, since you were the second, you are still the second. All right. Would anyone like to speak to the motion at this time? Knowing that there is very little time left since we are about to vote and we need to have findings for anything that we vote on. Commissioner Anderson.
First, I have a question for the staff. I didn't see in the packet non-conforming determination, but there was mention to one from 2009. I guess the question is, if there was a non-conforming determination made, at this point, I'm assuming that the tower has non-conforming rights, and the landscaping and fencing would have non-conforming rights. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Mr. Anderson, potentially. That's something, so if we look at page 146, 47, 48, and 49 of the staff packet, that's the non-conforming determination. And really, if we just look at page 148, there's some things that they did not address, because a lot of that's, that back in 2009, some of that wasn't necessarily in code like it is today. So that's why, as you saw, our conditions in the staff packet that we put on there, basically wanted them to redo the non-conforming determination, to look at all the standards of today's for the tower and see what they kind of filter out what they do have non-conforming rights for.
Thanks.
Commissioner Gardner?
Thanks. I have another question for the staff as well. And it's just to kind of confirm my way of thinking about the case a little bit and related to the issue of non-conforming rights. And that's that I gather that there are some aspects of the property that are not going to be changed with this new tower wrap, or might be changed, but not necessary to the wrap, such as the fencing and some of the landscaping, and there may be non-conforming use rights associated with that. But are we to be thinking of the tower wrap itself as like a new, I mean, that's a new structure, right? That's what the point of this application is?
Through the chair, Mr. Gardner, that's absolutely correct, and that's the reason why we're here tonight, because we're not looking at the tower wrap as part of the original structure, but rather a new structure, and that's the reason behind the conditional use requirement here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Krishna?
Thank you. I also have another question for the staff. It was brought up both by the petitioner and in the application that they were not sure why the site was zoned R2M. Do you have any historical information about why that decision was made and why it's not antenna farm or anything else?
Through the chair, Ms. Krishna, yes, this property was zoned during area-wide zoning. At the time of area-wide zoning, there wasn't an antenna farm zoning district. So, and broadly speaking, during area-wide zoning, they didn't look at specific properties and zone them for specific uses that may have occupied the property at the time. So it was area-wide. We zoned the entire area R2, and thus we didn't have an antenna farm zoning, so it wouldn't have been zoned that. They could potentially make an application to rezone the property today, but they enjoy, to a certain extent, non-conforming rights for a lot of the things that happen on that property. So there's really no reason to do that at this point.
Given that there are 2 towers currently on the site, does the staff think that an antenna farm zoning would be more appropriate than the current non-conforming situation?
Through the chair, Ms. Krishna, it's hard to say. We'd have to evaluate the merits of a rezoning application before we could say whether or not it'd be appropriate to rezone the property.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner?
So I guess I'll just kick things off a little bit. I don't know that I have findings yet exactly so much as a suggestion on kind of where I'm thinking at the moment. And I think the case is a little unusual, at least trying to apply these criteria, because of the fact that there already is like a tower there. But the concern I have at the moment is just my reading of the code is that we need to make some findings in order to approve the application that I'm not sure we have information adequate, at least for myself, to be comfortable with. And I'll just, I guess, read those so we have those identified. But I'm looking at 2105-040K3G, which by my reading means that we need to, in order to approve it, find that denial of the application would unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services or prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless service. That's one finding. And then that same section also references case 6, which includes, among other things, in subsection H, a statement that no new tower structure shall be permitted unless the applicant demonstrates to the reasonable satisfaction of the decision-making body that, one, no existing tower or structure can accommodate or replace the applicant's proposed antenna, and two, no alternative technology that does not require the use of tower structures can accommodate or replace the applicant's proposed antenna. There was some discussion of the other tower that's on the property, on the north tower. It sounds like we don't have, at least by my understanding, a analysis as to options for that tower and how these two towers, might relate or might be able to have the antenna consolidated amongst the two towers. And so I'm wondering, I guess, for the staff and maybe for other commissioners, if it might make sense to delay this and go back and look at some of these factors in a little more detail before we finalize the case.
I want to chime in on that too, kind of piggyback on that question. Do we not have to make that finding in this case because it's not a new standalone tower? It's more of a, I think the thing that's I'm having trouble in on this instance is that we're kind of in this quasi land between building a new tower, because it is a new structure, and it kind of just seems like a remodel of the existing tower. And so in my mind, those findings that Commissioner Gardner referenced, I almost feel like they don't apply to this situation, because for those two instances, it really is just a remodel. And so it wouldn't apply in my mind. However, maybe I'm interpreting that wrong.
Through the chair, Ms. Bailey, I would say yes, you're probably right. This is an interesting situation that we're in here tonight. This is effectively a modification to a de facto conditional use. It's a major modification. It's because it's quote unquote a tower wrap, but essentially a new tower outside of the existing tower. It requires a conditional use permit. But we're in this situation where you have to consider the structure that already exists there today, along with the rights that already exist there today, but also not forget about the standards for which we have for new towers in the municipality of Anchorage today. So it is a very odd place that we find ourselves here tonight, but I think that you're right. I don't know that you necessarily need to address those standards. I think the standards addressed by staff are adequate to approve this case. However, I would say that if the commission felt like they needed additional information, rather than denying the case, if it could be postponed and allow the petitioner and staff to come back with additional information, I think that would be appropriate as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Strike.
Yeah, as it's currently proposed, I'm not sure I'm behind this. And part of it is what staff just even mentioned. We have a tower that is grandfathered in for its current use. No changes required. But we're getting caught up in some semantics, so I think we need to zero in. Is this a new tower, or is this a remodel of the existing tower? And I think it's clear this is a new tower, and it's going to be newly structurally engineered in order to accommodate new and expanded uses of the tower. That but for the fact that it's 283 feet, those same uses may not gravitate towards that particular tower. It's because that tower, as currently stipulated, is grandfathered in at 283 feet. If nothing changed, they continue on with their existing tower at 283 feet with no wrap, no changes, and an engineering report that says it's in good condition. Instead, we're presented with the idea that it's structurally deteriorated. Well, it's only structurally deteriorated but for the fact that they want to apply new uses to the tower that aren't otherwise allowed in this, on this tower or in this spot on a 283-foot tower. So if this had been a building that had been grandfathered in with a commercial building and didn't meet code, everything's fine until it was 51% destroyed in a fire, and the municipality is going to come in and say, oh, you got to destroy it all, and you got to conform now to the new zoning. So we have a tower here that the condition, the use of the tower is grandfathered in based on its original use. That's what you use. I can't get behind allowing a new tower to be built using the old grandfather height limit of 283 feet to apply new uses to that tower at that location. It's not deteriorated. The engineer's report says it's in great shape. It's in good shape. It's serving its purpose.
Commissioner Anderson.
A question about conditional use permits for towers. Is the number of antennas and the use of the tower part of the conditional use approval, or is it just conformance with these criteria?
Through the chair, Mr. Anderson, no, it's just the tower itself. Yeah, there is co-location requirements and separations, but it's just the tower. Dave may add something to it.
Yeah, just real quick through the chair, Mr. Anderson. The antennas themselves go through a separate administrative approval process that's handled by land use review. They review each antenna as they're placed on the structure.
So if I understand right, if we look at this as a non-existing but existing conditional use permit that we're modifying, the conditional use permit originally might not have specified the antennas or the equipment or the use of it. It would just specify the height. And for that reason, I'm kind of inclined to say it's more of a remodel or a structural upgrade of an existing tower. And I don't see why changes in technology and different uses or different antennas would make it difficult to approve a modification to a conditional use. So from that perspective, I'm willing to approve it.
But I know you're countering what I
Commissioner Strike.
said earlier. I'm sorry, what
Commissioner
countering
Strike.
what I said earlier. But
Commissioner Strike, I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm just going to say that Commissioner Anderson had the next one in the queue, and then it's Commissioner O'Quinn, and you can comment after that. Commissioner O'Quinn.
So I'm going to side with Commissioner Strike here on this because it essentially gives this project an entirely new useful life, that's going to extend, another 50 years or however long this thing's going to last. And I think that the height of it being 283 feet and being that coincidental with the existing height is just merely a way to kind of get around the variance requirements and that sort of thing. So I'm gonna side with Commissioner Gardner, or not side with Commissioner Gardner, but I think echo his concerns that we need to have an administrative finding about those other factors that he highlighted, that it's essentially new construction.
Commissioner Strike, I don't see you in the queue, but I'm giving you next word.
I guess my point back to the previous commissioner was, if it were a remodel, we wouldn't be here. So it's either a remodel or it's not. But we wouldn't be having this discussion if it were a remodel. It's a new tower.
Commissioner Winchester.
I'm probably leaning with the Commissioner Anderson on this. It's they have substantial grandfather rights on the property. They're serving the public use, and I'm in support of it as written.
Commissioner Gardner.
I think I'd like to, I guess, would a postponement result from a motion? Would we need a motion for that?
We would need a motion.
I'll just go ahead and put the motion on the table so we can figure this out. And if there's a second, I can speak to it.
Move to postpone by Commissioner Gardner, seconded by Commissioner O'Quinn. Commissioner Gardner, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think I'll just say that, as I said before, I think I recognize it is a quirky case in the sense that there is a tower already there. So some of the factors I identified, it's not clear exactly how they would apply. But and at the end of the day, I'm not sure that I'm totally opposed to this, but I see value in postponing it to get some additional information about other options, because I do feel like the application would lead to a greatly extended life of this tower, and I think it's worth evaluating other options before we have before we grant that life to a tower that has some challenge meeting some of the criteria, in particular with respect to height and its location given to residential areas. So I would support my motion to postpone.
Calling myself as next in the queue, there are a couple things that I think would help to have further clarified. I do think that item that Commissioner Gardner identified and whether or not those two criteria would apply in this instance is something that, if this gets postponed, I would like those to be addressed further. I think based on what I'm hearing from other people, the commission would also like clarification on kind of, since this is a new structure, what does that mean? I feel like that's not completely answered. Commissioner Strike.
This question for the staff. We've had some conditional uses that have sunset clauses or they have time elements, and some that are wide and open, then they go and they're attached to the properties. Can you do a conditional use in a situation like this that might do a periodic 5-year review? Because it is a different, the zoning changes, but at least now we're taking a stance that says you can do it now, but it's subject to review on a periodic every 5-year basis, because things do change, as opposed to the comment that was made that we're going to grandfather this in or allow new uses to be grandfathered in perpetuity. This is either a time to reset the clock, fix it, or let's live with what we had, which was where I was leaning before. But in the hopes of trying to move forward and, technology changes, et cetera, down the road, does it give us an avenue, would that give us a different avenue approach?
Through the chair, Mr. Strike, to address your first question, no, I wouldn't recommend sunsetting anything here. Conditional uses don't typically have that. I know you said you've seen that in the past. I wouldn't recommend doing it here. To your second question, yes, you could impose a condition for them to return to the commission every 5 years. However, in doing so, I would recommend that you establish some standards that need to be addressed with their application to come back. So as essentially some questions that need to be answered. Otherwise, they're coming back and coming back for what reason? So yes, the answer to your question is yes, you can impose a condition that requires them to come back. It's not typical, but it is certainly something you can do.
Commissioner Anderson.
I guess I just put it out there that I'd be willing to move forward with voting on this tonight, but understand that if the rest of the commission would like additional information, I would go that route. I would like to put it out there also that it sounds like the height is one of the issues that we're hung up on, and it says that this commission does have the right to approve a variance to additional height as requested. Because it's an existing site, because there's not been public pushback on the height, it provides services and would continue to provide services that the general public throughout Anchorage uses. I think that there's plenty of justification to address the tower structure height portion of it. But again, if the body would like to postpone for more information, I would go with that route also.
Commissioner Krishna.
Yeah, perhaps just one last question for staff. Do we have information about whether there are other towers of similar height in R2M districts in the bowl, or other towers of similar height in the bowl?
Or 283 feet?
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't.
There's no information available at this time about what.
Through the chair, Ms. Krishna, I think there are other towers that are large towers in the bowl. However, I don't know that we can give you information on, specifically roughly 280-foot towers in the R2M district. I don't believe that there are any towers of that size in the R2M. There certainly are large towers that are around town. Can't say the exact height of those towers, But I don't believe there are any that large in the R2M.
So just a follow-up question sorry, Commissioner Christian, were you done? Just as a follow-up question for staff, when exactly was this lot designated as R2M? I forget when you...
Through the chair, Ms. Bailey, this is a property that was zoned probably in the early 1970s
right,
during
so
area-wide rezoning.
It's been existed for, you could say that a tower has existed that was 283 feet in an R2 zone for the past 50 years.
That's correct.
And to give you an answer to that, the property was zoned R2 on December 21st, 1970.
Thank you. Mr. Whitfield.
Just one more point through the chair to the commission. If the commission is considering postponing tonight's case, if we could get specifically the questions that need to be answered prior to this case coming back to the commission. I know you did, Ms. Bailey, point out a couple things, but if I could direct it to Mr. Gardner with your motion, just give us specifics on exactly if the postponement is successful. Give us specifics on exactly what you'd like to have answered, so we can be prepared when we come back next time.
Sure.
Mr. Gardner.
Yeah, I appreciate that. For me, primarily, I think I'm interested in the criteria that I identified in 210504 K3G. There's a section there, and then those two sections in K6H, which I think go primarily to the question of, alternative options to constructing this new tower. If there's other ways to get the same result or other locations for the antenna, is how I read those. And then there's this section about unreasonable discrimination among providers of functional equivalent services in 040 K3G that I don't know exactly what that's getting at, and I would look to the staff to help kind of illuminate a little bit about what that's getting at and whether that's satisfied or not.
Are there any other commission members that have specific questions for staff that they would like addressed, and that's one of the reasons that they are requesting a postpone, or that they would want a postponement? All right. So the current motion on the floor is to postpone. Staff, a question. Do we have a date that we should include for our postponement date, or should we leave that open-ended? Or how long we should leave for this to be open?
Through the chair to the commission, I would say we could come back next month.
Commissioner Gardner, are you okay with this being, your motion being to postpone for a month?
Yeah.
Okay. I am going to put myself back in the queue and just say, I think at this time, I think I was kind of prepared to vote for it as is, but I'm going to vote to postpone. I think there are some discrepancies that the commission has and isn't quite clear on. I think specifically when it goes to those co-location standards, should we be saying, can it be met by an other tower? Does that mean that the other tower is the current tower in place? So can the additional upgrades that they want to make with the new antenna, which is the wrap, be done with a current tower that's in place, being the existent tower? And so I think that might have to be addressed on maybe at least a few of the standards that are here, but the co-location is one that I'm seeing. Some of them, yeah, I guess that's the main one is that co-location standard. Commissioner Looney, do you have another item you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, actually, and this is Commissioner Strike mentioned this, is whether this is considered really a reconstruction or a remodel or like a new tower. Because I think that the answer to that is will influence the fact that we're even here speaking here tonight for this conditional use. Because if they already have a conditional use for this tower, the exact same height, really, I guess the clarification for what this proposed work is how it's being looked at from the staff. It makes a difference. If this was a building that's had a conditional use, at what point of a major remodel or a portion of a remodel would they have to go renew their conditional use?
Commissioner Anderson.
If it is voted to postpone, it would be nice to have an updated non-conforming determination for this site before it comes back so that we can know for certain which items are non-conforming rights.
All right. There is a motion to postpone for a month on the floor. Call for a vote. All right, that motion passes. Does someone want to grab Commissioner Spinelli from out in the hall? Also, I'd like to thank the petitioner for coming in and for their time today. All right, moving on to item G2. Can we have the report from staff?
Thank you. So this is a amendment to Title 21 and the Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations, specifically pertaining to the 9-member requirement for each board and commission that the planning department staffs, which is the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Urban Design Commission, Zoning Board of Examiners Appeals, and the Planning Board. So you have 3 things in front of you. One is a brief summary of the proposed ordinance, the proposed assembly ordinance, and the proposed assembly memorandum. As you can find in the summary on the first page, what this ordinance, the proposed ordinance specifically does is adds the 9-member requirement to each board and commission. Currently, it's not outlined in the Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations that each board and commission needs 9 members for full membership. So we're adding that to specifically the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals and the Planning Board. It standardizes the membership and quorum requirements language for each board and commission. Doesn't make any substantive changes aside from the membership number requirement. And then finally, it moves the membership and quorum requirements from the Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations to Chapter 2 of Title 21, which is the chapter that governs boards and commissions. And I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, this will go to the assembly eventually, but although this does not make any really substantive changes to the Planning and Zoning Commission's purview, we wanted to make sure that each commission had board and commission had the opportunity to review, comment, and vote on this before it goes to the assembly. So I'll take any questions.
Commissioner Strike.
One question that's come up before regarding the abilities of commissions to vote via telephonic for certain types of actions, especially like for approvals of just say consent agenda, where there's no public testimony, no public hearings, nothing being presented other than administrative business. Would this be a forum to incorporate such an activity for that type of action or allowance to be able to take place?
So this section really just outlines what's required for a quorum in terms of membership, and I don't believe that would be this would not really be the place to address the procedure through which the votes can take place. It's really just saying, we need 9 members for full membership of each board and commission. Not really outlining how those votes can take place, but it's a good question, good point.
Well, I hear you. I mean, we're all volunteers. It's all non-paid. We're strictly doing a community service here when we sit here on these commissions, and there's other commissions as well. And so it has come about a couple of times where we've had to meet solely to vote on consent agenda in order so that the administrative staff can keep the paperwork flowing behind the scenes. And to have a minute-and-a-half meeting where people are coming from all different parts of the municipality or traveling is ridiculous. If there's a means and methods to get around that. Seeing this coming before us today tells me that there appears to be a method, that we may be able to have some methodology to change the existing rules, regulations, or whatever that we're bound by here. Could I ask staff to see if we can't put that on some sort of track similar to this action that we might be able to get in front of the assembly as well?
Yeah, so I completely hear that concern, and the fact that really short meetings might be more conducive to different types of voting. I'll bring that up to Dave, and I'll make sure that I don't think this is the vehicle for it, but it might not even be a code revision for that type of action. I have no idea, but it's a good point, and I'll make sure it's discussed when we bring that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to echo Commissioner Strike's concern. I don't necessarily think we would have the time to comment on it for this, but I would like to see it in the future.
Noted. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the item at hand? Since we don't have a petitioner in this case, we would open it for public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to testify on this item? Seeing no one wishing to testify on this item, are there any other questions, comments from the commissioner, or would someone like to make a motion to approve? And just as a clarification, Mr. Hodges, we are looking for a motion to approve the amended ordinance.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, recommended. Commissioner Strike. Yeah, I think since I butchered it, I don't think you can so move my butchering.
I move for approval as presented.
Second by Commissioner Krishna. Anyone else wishing to speak on this motion? All right, call for a vote. And that motion passes. Moving on to item G3, can we have a report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is case 2020-008, an amendment to Anchorage Municipal Code Title 2105-070D13B, which is a use-specific standards for large domestic animal facilities. This ordinance amends that code section, and the purpose of this amendment to Title 21 is to clarify the procedure for obtaining approval for a large domestic animal facility. The current code requires the approval of a State of Alaska Anchorage Soil and Water Conservation District Conservation Plan. The State of Alaska Anchorage Soil and Water Conservation District is not a regulatory body, and it is currently not a functioning organization. This has created complications for members of the public and applicants during the permitting process for these large domestic animal facilities. The Municipal Watershed Management Services Division has expertise needed and required to review the animal waste management plans, and it is the appropriate regulatory agency for this type of water quality approval. This change to the use-specific standards clarifies the appropriate regulating agency for animal waste management plans. I'll be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Strike.
What constitutes a large domestic animal facility?
A large domestic animal facility is any facility that has 4 or more large animals, horses, cows, those types of.
So anyone with a kennel or sled dog racing team in the municipality of Anchorage will be subject to this?
No, dogs are not considered large animals.
So back again, re-clarified, large domestic animal facility defined again as what?
A large domestic animal facility is 4 or more large domestic animals. So when you're talking about large domestic animals, typically what we see is horses, but cattle, cows, those types of animals would be included.
But
dogs
are specifically excluded or just not part of, so are they part of the medium domestic animal facility?
Dogs are considered small animals, not large.
Okay.
Commissioner, thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to testify on this matter? All right. Comes back to us, the commission. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Krishna.
My first motion.
Yay.
In the matter of, what case?
It's 08.
In the case of 2020-0008, review and recommendation to the Assembly of an ordinance amending AMC 21-05-070D 13B to change the use-specific standards for large domestic animal facility. I move to approve as presented.
Moved by Commissioner Krishna, seconded by Commissioner Winchester. Would anyone wish to speak on this motion? I'll just echo the comments of staff in that the previous regulatory body is no longer in effect, and so this is just allowing work to proceed as it should and put the proper regulatory agency in review. Commissioner Looney?
I really just echo the same thing. It's fine that I work with the Watershed Group quite a bit, and they are adept at addressing water quality issues. They're really, what the concern is here, I guess, for these large animals. So I was surprised to see that they weren't already in the process. Maybe they were. Maybe that's where people have been redirected to after the when they see that this other group does not exist. But it seems like an appropriate process to include for this review.
Call for vote. And that motion passes. Before we move on to item G4, I just wanted to get Mr. Whitfield up to date on a matter that came up while I was gone, was that case 2020-0007 was approved. However, some members of the commission, myself included, but Commissioner Strike was the one that had the good idea about this, is that since we're able to do revisions to these rules, it might be nice if when we have meetings where all there is a consent agenda, if we could do absentee voting, so that way we're not forcing items to get delayed out when they could get resolved earlier. Now moving on to, Commissioner Whitfield, Mr. Whitfield.
Not a commissioner, maybe one day. Just to address that point, I couldn't agree with you more. However, I would like to consult with our legal team to find out if that's possible. I think that would be a very good thing if it, from a legal perspective, is possible.
Thank you. Moving on to case 2020-0009. Can we have the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case 2020-0009 is an amendment to AMC Title 2105 to change the use-specific standards for land reclamation. Please note that there are 2 comments that have been laid on the table for this case.
Can I actually interrupt you real quick? Can I ask just the members of the public what item they were here for? Oh, okay. Thank you. Have a good night. All right, sorry to interrupt you. I was just confused. Yeah.
Thank you. So please note there are 2 comments that have been laid on the table for this case. This ordinance is a revision to Code Section 2105-060E and the Table of Allowed Uses in 2105-010E to change the use-specific standards for land reclamation. This change will allow projects with less than 50,000 cubic yards of fill material as a by right use and require a conditional use permit for projects with more than 50,000 cubic yards of fill material. The purpose of this change is to remove a duplicative review process from the permitting for land reclamation projects with a fill quantity of 5,000 to 49,999 cubic yards of material. In a side-by-side comparison of the administrative review process and the building safety zoning review fill and grade permit process, all of the same items for review are addressed. The building safety fill and grade permit review literally evaluates the exact same information as a site plan review. Therefore, the administrative site plan review process does not add value to the review process for smaller land reclamation projects. Land reclamation projects involving 50,000 cubic yards of fill material would have the potential for a larger impact to surrounding areas and therefore would require a higher level of review under the conditional use permit process. I'll be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Commissioner Strike.
Thank you. Does this impact any current projects that are currently taking place in the municipality?
No, there are no current projects that this change would impact.
Now, when we talk about current project, we talk about cut and fill and fill material. We see some sites around town that are being surcharged with material currently. Would this have impact on any of those sites?
Those sites that are currently being surcharged or that already have fill permit or fill in place have already been through the permitting process. So this change would impact future projects.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, in the public comments, I guess you stated in your presentation that it's the exact same review that administrative site plan has as the building department has, but maybe just clarify again for me, because they point out that offset impacts aren't as thoroughly considered in the building department as with an administrative site plan review, and that the building department doesn't have the same notification that an administrative site plan review would have. An administrative site plan review is their notification but not a public hearing.
Through the chair, an administrative site plan review process does not have public notification required. And I did go through the fill and grade checklist for the building safety permitting process right next to our administrative site plan review process, and it is literally the exact same information that is being looked at. Offsite impacts are considered by reviews through private development and as well as the traffic engineering department, the right-of-way department, and stormwater. Those are all reviews that are looked at during the building safety permitting process as well.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you. I didn't quite catch all of that question, so you may have answered this, but I gather the criteria are the same. Did you also say that there was no difference in terms of the public involvement between the two?
Through the chair, that is correct. An administrative site plan review does not require public notification.
Okay. And then I was just curious, there's a reference in here to a difference in $30,000 in local government effects. Is that a savings, I assume? Or which direction is the arrow point for that $30,000? That's on page 6, the final paragraph. Or what is that? I guess maybe what is that $30,000 referring to?
when the economic effects of the amendment are less than $30,000, a summary of economic effects is
Oh,
not
that's just
required.
the
There's
threshold?
no impact.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Commissioner Strike.
Are you in receipt of the response that Nancy Pease provided?
Yes.
Yes. And just going through here briefly, I guess one of the concerns, if I'm interpreting this correctly, is on smaller scale lots where we're not going through that we do create changes to the stormwater runoff when we're filling or when we surcharge, and it impacts the lower hillside groundwater and the runoff. Am I reading her issues correctly or her concern correctly?
Our concern is that, as I understand it, is that off-site impacts are not as thoroughly considered in a building department review, which is not adequate. I mean, it's not an actual reality. The reality of it is that the off-site impacts are not thoroughly. The off-site impacts she's alluding to are not looked at during the administrative site plan review process. Those are looked at by private development, they're looked at by the right-of-way department, and they're looked at by stormwater review, which are all departments that also review during the building safety permitting process.
Okay, because I've lived on the below Golden View where she identifies, and years ago we had problems with development doing the fill above, and it totally disrupted all the flow and the water channels that were going down through the hillside, and it caused diversions and so forth, and the glaciations and streets, etc. So that's a concern for the hillside. You probably don't have the same concern Midtown Anchorage. But then again, you're not having the same fill situation that we see here. I'm just concerned that she may have a point, or there may be some unintended consequences of impact that don't get captured soon enough or caught soon enough in the review process in order to be addressed? Or are we pushing the problem quite literally downhill to another department with time?
Through the chair, Mr. Strike, quite honestly, the planning department is probably not the appropriate body to look at those types of concerns. They're probably more appropriately directed to private development or watershed management, which is the reviewing body that looks at the fill and grade permit through building safety. So while there are concerns there, and Ms. Pease brings up some valid concerns, we feel like the building safety department looks at those from an impact and public safety perspective, and is more appropriately the body to be looking at that. I might also add that Ms. Calhoun mentioned the fact that administrative site plan review does not provide public notice. So it's not as though there's any additional process that the planning department will be doing that is not already being done by building safety.
So if I heard that correctly, you got it. The department's got this under control.
That is correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Winchester.
Can you talk a little bit about the time frame, the 1 year time frame? One concern you'd have is someone with, say, like a 75,000 yard field job under administrative, and they're going to get it done in a year, and then a year comes and goes, and they didn't quite get done, and we just want to finish next year under administrative site review. How would the city handle a situation like that?
So the way the code is currently written, if it was not, if the 75,000 cubic yards of fill was not completed within 1 year, they would have to come back for a conditional use process.
Even though they're 75% done with the project?
Correct. Under this proposed amendment, any fill and grade project exceeding 50,000 cubic yards, regardless of the time frame, would require conditional use.
Even if they're less than 50,000 yards to go the second year?
The way the current code is written, yes, that's correct.
And talk about the levels of 5,000 cubic yards versus 50,000 as those threshold levels. How did you guys develop that?
So the 50,000 cubic yard threshold is similar to and equivalent with the natural resource extraction limits for a conditional use requirement. Since the two, land reclamation and natural resource extraction, are similar in nature, we felt that the amount was appropriate to be similar as well.
All right, I'm going to open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to testify? Mr. Potter, way to keep us on our toes.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Tim Potter with Dowell. 2 or 3 areas to discuss tonight. First off, the review process at the administrative site plan review versus what the Building Safety Department does through fill and grade permitting and all that is the same, and it's been redundant, and it's been unfortunate that it's been that way since the day that the code got modified and had that requirement. I don't believe that we should strive to have redundant processes that you have to continue to wallow through, especially when they're not in the same time frame, causes projects to have problems. In the code revisions for Title 21, they basically took reclamation and natural resource extraction and blended them together as similar activities. And that's where I would argue that that's not necessarily the case. And I'll try and give you a couple of examples. And I know I'm limited to 3 minutes. So if I have the Odom project for a warehouse distribution center on about 15 to 17 acres, and it's, Mr. Winchester knows how bad the soil was, and you have a terrible soil condition and water table and everything else, you're going to hog that material out and it's going to be disposed of. And you're going to bring competent gravel back in place and do an engineered fill. That's going to be reviewed as part of the grading and fill plan that the city reviews. There's no commercial use on site or manufacturing of taking that organic soil and make it into topsoil, like the hotel project did for about 5 or 6 years, 7 years on C Street at about 48th. And they're looking to build a hotel there now. And that's a whole nother subject. But that project had well over 50,000 cubic yards of material taken out and brought back in. And I think that's different than an extraction project or a project that goes in and excavates the organics on site, stockpiles it, brings in loam, sand, silts, mixes that to make topsoil, and creates a commercial product manufactured on site to be sold. Now, does that make sense from a land development standpoint? If you have the time, yes. The 50,000 cubic yards stems, quite frankly, from a case that was in the Eagle River, Chugiak, Birchwood area called Buzzwell versus Municipality of Anchorage. The judge at that time said, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. And that was where someone went in with a subdivision design and then started excavating out, saying that they were grading the site in preparation for development, and then sold that material commercially. So my concern, and it doesn't have to be addressed necessarily tonight, but I'd at least like to alert the Planning Commission and the staff that I believe that there needs to be a revisitation. And if I conclude with one last point.
You're really stretching me here.
Commissioner
Strike, are you going to ask a question, Mr. Potter?
Not like I'm holding anybody up, except you. There's a Corps of Engineers permit that has been issued. The time lapse, it's being reissued at this very moment for JL Properties land at the southwest corner of 100th and C Street. It is a wetland bog. They paid over $1.2 million for mitigation to buy other lots to be able to fill that. That will take over 50,000 cubic yards of material brought in, nothing being excavated from the site. And that's going to require a conditional use permit. Eventually, it will go through a large retail site plan review. So I'm trying to determine and figure out what what does the community gain in that situation? There's no residential around it. State DOT roads. There'll have to be a traffic control plan reviewed by the state and the city to make sure that there's no traffic impacts. And I'm at a loss that at 50,000 cubic yards of material, upside down or backwards, you're just doing a conditional use. And it's January now. If someone tried to put a case packet together or an application, if they were really good, they'd make it by February, probably March. You'd have a 2-month delay or a 3-month, because now you have to have a neighborhood meeting or a community meeting. So now you're already into earlier midsummer, and you'll be doing all of that design and processing at risk. So for large projects, right now you're putting some of them in potential jeopardy, even as early in the year as it seems to be right now. So that's my concern. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So a couple questions. You're for or against this change?
I am for the change as far as getting rid of the redundant review at 5,000 cubic yards to 49,999. I would appreciate it if the staff and the Planning Commission could come back and reconsider at some point this magical 50,000 cubic yards, because I think there could be a clause that would simply, if I can get it here, that would, under use-specific standards, which you are changing tonight, if the land reclamation project includes operations at a scale involving 50,000 cubic yards, which include a direct commercial sale of the excavated material or the manufacturing on site of materials for sale commercially, is a conditional use. So,
how would this have impacted that property on C Street, the hotel row that you identified?
The complaints that went from the private sector to the city through the building official at the time, who was Ron Thompson, would have shut down that operation and told them to get a conditional use permit, because it was literally a natural resource extraction project by definition. And it was allowed to go as part of a building permit, fill and grade. And they said they were going to be done. They said they were going to be done, and it lasted 4 to 6 years. So.
Commissioner Spinelli.
I'm not necessarily sure we're going to do this tonight, but
and that's why
while you're here, I thought one of our comments gave an example of what 50,000 yards does to a 1 acre lot, and that's pretty extreme. But I was just curious, I guess this might be for you or for staff, is there what 50,000 yards seems like just an arbitrary number, and it might not be a very big deal when you spread it out over a 20, 40 acre site. I guess, has there been discussions about changing the 50,000 number, and what should it be?
I think the other processes for a project at scale, like when you have industrially zoned property, which much of it that's left open for development is on some of the crappiest soils in town, it's hard enough to do that project from a cost standpoint, feasibility anyway, that to throw another hurdle in the way when they're not truly doing a natural resource extraction, organic soil, peat development, that kind of thing. They're just taking the material out and they're bringing gravel back in. That's a project, in my view. And there's processes in place to look at that. So, yeah, I think the 50,000 cubic yards is a scale that was easy to pick, and I'm suggesting the basis was the findings or the directives of the court on the Buswell versus MOA. And is it the right number? I don't know if it's the right number. But it doesn't take much on a site that's taking 5 to 10 feet of fill to end up getting to 50,000 cubic yards when you've got a 15-acre site.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. You're done. All right, Mr. Whitfield.
Sorry, I was gonna let Mr. Potter have the floor before I jumped in on the 50,000 cubic yard question. It's not, Mr. Spinelli, it's not necessarily an arbitrary number that we just pulled out of thin air. I think Ms. Calhoun mentioned the fact that it is a similar process to natural resource extraction. Natural resource extraction has a 50,000 cubic yard threshold for conditional use. As Mr. Potter mentioned, there was a lawsuit that established 50,000 cubic yards. So the idea of 50,000 cubic yards was not necessarily just a number we pulled out of thin air. I would also like to mention that the intent of this ordinance here tonight is to deal with the redundancy that we see in admin site plan review versus the fill and grade permit for building safety. Not necessarily, while I understand where Mr. Potter is coming from, not necessarily an opportunity to open the book up for all land reclamation activities. Although we would, I guess, consider opening those discussions internally with the planning department. If we agreed, we'd probably bring it back. I would also, and I'd like to mention the fact that 50,000 cubic yards of material equates to roughly 3,000 truckloads. So that's a fairly significant amount of truck traffic. Now, granted, in Mr. Potter's examples, there are one-off situations that that probably are, unique to their situations, but the way that we zone property and regulate property in town is to capture the vast majority, not to zone to the one-off situation that might occur. So what we're trying to do here is fix a problem or redundancy in the code while not necessarily establishing regulations to deal with the extreme example. And he has a couple of them, and I get that, but we're trying to just fix the redundancy in the code.
All right, what is the will of the body? Commissioner Anderson.
For case 2020-0009, review and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Anchorage Municipal Assembly for an ordinance amending AMC Title 21, Section 2105-060E, to change the use-specific standards for land reclamation, Sections 2105-010E, Table 2105-1, Table of Allowed Uses to Allowed Land Reclamation as either a permitted or conditional use. Move to approve.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Winchester. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I think it was clarified by staff that the building department and administrative site plan review have the exact same review criteria, and the building department has additional departments within them that provide watershed analysis and construction runoff analysis that the planning department doesn't. So I think it's an appropriate change.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Would anyone else like to speak? All right, call for a vote. That motion passes. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Strike, second by Commissioner O'Quinn. Seeing no objections, we are adjourned.